Thank you all for joining us still. We've heard some fantastic discussions across a wide range of topics, all pertinent, all priorities, I should say, which is why we're closing on this prioritization. I'm joined alongside myself by some great tech leaders, Mark, Paul and Mandy. Mark's joining us virtually, of course. Paul, let's start with you. What are you prioritizing? CIO Amnesty International, we've had a lot this afternoon. What are you prioritizing for next year, though?
We're still looking to maximize our investments of our current technology landscape. That means making sure we've got good adoption of what we're already paying for, making sure we don't have any waste in our expenditure as well. We're certainly still prioritizing cost efficiencies, and we're certainly still prioritizing the efficiency of our team. And we're looking to reduce the tech landscape a little bit. I think, as we all know, the larger the tech stack, the larger the tech landscape, the more nodes you have to worry about, the more complexity you have, the more cost you carry. So in the organization I'm in, and I'm sure many of yours, simplicity and simplification of that landscape is still right at the top of the list for us.
We spent 10 years trying to centralize all of our data in one location, and all of the regulations over the last 2 years have done their very best to reverse those decisions. And you're starting to see, depending where your businesses are based, decentralization of data. So if you've got US operations, we are seeing an increased demand for data to be there. Same for China. And there's lots of regulations around that. And we're trying to understand how we unpick all of that strategy in a secure way that we can run a fragmented network in the same way that we're currently doing. And it's very, very difficult. We've all gone to the cloud, and now we're trying to work out what multi-cloud and multi-jurisdiction feels like.
Paul, what are you not prioritizing?
We've got our people that need to work in different ways these days. So we're not prioritizing things that necessarily force them to work the same way. So we want to allow inclusion and diversity to come through in the way people work and the devices that they use. So we're not prioritizing things around the edge. We're trying to focus on the core. And we're not looking, I guess, weirdly, because we're such large consumers of ecosystems, we're prioritizing helping our users adopt what's on those development roadmaps, which means we're not looking too far afield at alternatives at the moment.
Okay.
So there's a lot of focus centrally.
We look at projects and deliverables that go across the board. So if it supports our fee earners and our business services staff and our client service to be more efficient and effective and more profitable, then that goes up the priority list. A pet project from an individual wanting an individual thing for themselves is immediately dismissed, although in a very polite way.
Now, Mandy, you've probably heard all of this before.
I have.
Everything's a priority.
Everything.
Pet projects are not a priority.
Absolutely.
Why don't you explain to the audience where your prioritization strategy came about and a little bit about what that looks like?
So many moons ago, I attended a class on managing for value, and that's based on an economic profit model. And I decided to take that. It made absolute sense to me that if everything is based on value and you get the best return for whatever you invest, why could you not apply that to any kind of change or transformation or actually anything? You could apply it functionally, you could apply it to PE firms, you can apply it anywhere. And essentially what I've come up with is something that says all the decision makers need to be aligned. So my question for you guys would actually be, have your peers actually agreed with you on that? And have you got the budget to make sure that all of those things can be done in service of the strategy of the organization? If you have, great. But I haven't really come across too many organizations that actually have that. And so what I do is help to define what the criteria is. So we've got data to prove, or at least give some form of evidence and guidance to say, actually, this thing is going to give you the biggest value in service of that strategy or growth or simplification or whatever it might be.
Do you know that you're all aligned, your peers are aligned to your priorities?
It's like herding cats. I don't think you're ever always going to be aligned on all things. But what we've done, which I've had some success with, is get agreement on the model that we use to prioritize. So the criteria, the things that we ask of the initiatives. What are the 5 or 6 questions you're going to ask of every initiative to understand if it directly, indirectly, or intangibly supports that criteria point? Digital employee experience, risk reduction, strategy, whatever it may be. If you get agreement on the model, the answer is what the answer is.
Exactly. And what I go a step further by giving some actual data behind it,
Absolutely.
which means that when there is a conversation about it, it's really based on evidence, and then it's a
Absolutely.
slightly different
Yeah.
conversation. It makes it far more objective.
With objective scoring, I will add, not my scoring.
Objective scoring. And one of the trick of this is when you are actually looking at all the initiatives, you have someone that's neutral that is going through those scores with those
Absolutely.
people.
And where does the CEO sit with all of this? Because it really is their responsibility to prioritise. That's their role.
Everybody's objectives should flow from the CEO, and the priority should therefore fall out of that too. So it should be a pyramid of asks and therefore deliveries.
I work at a partnership and it's slightly different. So we don't have a traditional CEO type role. And partnerships are, for anyone who's worked in a partnership, I feel the same pain for you that I feel for myself. But ultimately, it is decision by several hundred people. And those priorities flex. They flex at the top level because of changing markets, but they also flex on geography and on clients. So it's very difficult to have a dictate from the top that you can just say, that's where we're going. And you either get a good score or you don't get a good score.
James Maunder recently left the London Clinic, a hospital. So I've used value prioritization frameworks and they've been pretty useful, very useful embedding them with agile, lean ways of working. Where I've struggled though is in prioritizing the boring stuff high enough. So the legacy renewal of really quite deeply aged systems. Any tips and tricks on that?
Yes, actually. So there are some things that you just absolutely have to do or else the business goes down. And quite frankly, a proportion of the work that you're doing, so whether it's a regulatory thing that you need to do, for example, regulatory reporting, it would fall into the same bucket. If you've got end of serviceable life tools, you have no choice but to actually do that work by a certain time. So there may be a time element that you can stretch out or bring in as necessary, but it should be heightened because there should be a bucket that should not be touched for things that absolutely must do.
I think there's probably two perspectives. The first is sometimes what's must do is subjective to who's observing the issue.
Good point.
But firstly, it's a risk appetite question, isn't it? I mean, sometimes the longer you leave things, the bigger the fire, the bigger the pain you'll suffer. Or it could be quite happily accepted that it could go wrong and it could have X business impact. I think that's the first thing. An alternate approach could actually be to bundle a few of those things together with common benefits, because maybe collectively they score higher on that framework as well, which I've certainly had some success with.
At Freshfields, we've made a change. So those that lead the functions have dual roles. So I'm one of the managing directors here as well. And the managing directors get together and we're responsible for jointly coming up with the strategies that we will deliver as a collective, agnostic of the roles that we sit in day to day. And that is about understanding and supporting one another through those deliverables, as opposed to challenging each other. It's about being advocates and being very clear on where the biggest bang for the buck is. And that is, other businesses are starting to follow that suit, where you have your different mindset of actually, how do we get better as a business? Don't worry about IT, security, HR, legal, whatever it might be. Collectively, how do we show the business that we're driving it forward? And we're almost like a super COO unit, if you like, where we are making changes based upon what we collectively agree is the right priorities for the organization. And then there are lower ones which sit within our own groups, which we deliver with support from others. So just wanted to add that in as a slightly different dynamic.
I like that super COO group.
Can I just add, I would call that a strategic change board, right? That is constantly meeting to make sure you can horse trade and stop, start, etc.
Thank you all very much for your time this afternoon. I really appreciate it. Please join me in giving them a hand.